After that, the girl calmed herself and stood there, trying again to command the beast. She did her best, but it seemed the creature was not comfortable with her. It remained cautious and barked at her. Meanwhile, our boy watched her attempt to tame the hellhound. He commented that her approach to handling his beast was wrong, saying she shouldn't treat it that way. As the girl knelt and shouted for the beast to come back and sit down, it ignored her and ran off. Frustrated, she searched for her unruly pet, complaining that the bastard wasn't listening to her. She angrily swore that if she caught it, it would regret it. While she continued her search, she noticed something surprising. Her troublesome beast had become gentle and was now obediently sitting with our boy. As she approached them with a determined stride, she wondered how the second-year student, Han Siha, had managed to tame her pet so easily. Noticing her, the boy asked if the beast was her pet, and mentioned he'd been observing her efforts for a while. He advised that her approach to taming the beast was wrong. The girl looked confused and deflated. Our boy explained that when a tamer becomes too emotional, it only agitates the beast further. She was surprised and couldn't believe that Han Siha was giving her advice. As she processed his words, she thought about the panel at Ardell Academy, the most prestigious school in the empire. This girl, Adele, an earth mage, had never ranked lower than third. Despite her commoner background and the many challenges she faced, few could match her skill. However, it was said that due to the opening exams being conducted by lottery, Adele ended up drawing the subject she was weakest in, Introduction to Basic Taming. She claimed she was simply unlucky, knowing full well her taming skills were lacking. That was why she was there, to practice. But what confused her the most was Han Siha, the boy who couldn't even tame a slime last year, a failure she had witnessed with her own eyes. There were also rumors about him being obsessed with black magic, and she considered him gloomy and inferior, a hopeless case. Yet here he was now, successfully taming her beast, making her usually gentle hellhound, almost obsessed with him. Astonished by this turn of events, she asked him how he did it. Han Siha replied that her beast was no longer agitated and that she could take it back now. Grateful for the advice, she picked up her beast and thanked him. Our boy then asked her why she had chosen a hellhound, noting it was quite a challenge for a first-time tamer. She proudly explained that a difficult monster like the hellhound had a high value for her, especially since it was her first attempt in the subject. She wanted to prove herself. Understanding her reasoning, our boy joked that he thought she might prefer a less challenging pet, perhaps one that liked mud baths or something less daunting. Annoyed by his teasing, the girl retorted sharply, pointing out that everyone had seen his earlier failures while she was taming her beast. Anyway, she couldn't help but wonder about Han Siha. He seemed like the kind of person who always acted naturally around others, speaking to her without hesitation, even though she was a commoner and he was a noble. As she observed him, she noticed the creature beside him, a dragon hatchling. What surprised her the most was that Han Siha had already tamed it, a rare feat for someone at their level as a second-year student. It was as if Han Siha had become a completely different person. After that, they went together to a place where the block slimes were, with Adele confirming and double-checking that they were in the right location. It seemed our boy had suggested this spot to her as a place where she could practice and improve her cooperation with her beast, helping them become more familiar with each other. When our boy confirmed that this was the right place, Adele got started. She pushed aside the vines and grass to reveal a group of block slimes hiding in the area. It seemed this was a spawn area. As she inspected it, our boy mentioned that he had almost wiped them out earlier, but they had respawned quickly. Hearing this, she told him not to worry, because she would handle it immediately. Drawing her sword, she confidently remarked that she could finish them off in one hit. Anyway, she ordered him to move aside for a moment as she prepared to fight the slimes. The slimes attacked first as soon as they spotted her, but with a single swing of her sword, Adele annihilated them all, leaving a deep, destructive mark where she had struck. Watching this, our boy was a bit amazed, though he couldn't resist teasing her, saying that her aggressive method seemed like overkill, practically burying the slimes alive. Hearing this, Adele grew angry and glared at him menacingly. But she managed to control her emotions, trying to respond calmly and act as if she was ignoring his comment. Meanwhile, a single slime had survived and was moving to attack her. To her surprise, Han Siha suddenly used magic to attack the slime. She couldn't believe it. She distinctly remembered that he couldn't use proper magic. Shocked, she was lost in thought. Our boy then asked if she hadn't noticed the slime coming back. Still in a state of shock, she fumbled for an excuse, trying to claim she had known all along but hadn't reacted. Before she could finish her sentence, our boy started to leave, calling for his cute Basil to follow, saying they needed to go. He added almost casually that it was a relief if that was the case, as he walked away. Deep down, Adele realized the truth. She hadn't sensed the slime approaching from behind. She also noticed that Han Siha's spell, his arrow of magic, had a level of precision that was far beyond what she would expect from a beginner. Our boy began to speak, but his words were cut off when a sudden error occurred in the dungeon, triggering an emergency alarm that echoed throughout the space. Both of them immediately became alert. Our boy asked her if she knew of any device there that could have caused this, but she had no idea either. As they stood there, trying to figure out what was happening, a man in the principal's office reported to the honorary principal that there was an emergency in the training ground dungeon. Upon hearing this, the principal asked if there had been an error with the spell and inquired about the current situation inside the dungeon and which students were there. The man replied that 2 students were present, one named Han Siha. Hearing this, the principal sighed and remarked that Han Siha was a troublemaker, implying that even if the boy died, it would not be a significant loss. However, he noted that the other student, a girl named Adele, was different. She was promising and talented, and her safety was a different matter entirely. The principal lamented that Han Siha lacked talent or skill, speculating that he would likely die, and had no chance of surviving such an error-ridden dungeon. He explained that if there was a flaw in the dungeon's magical formula, the monsters could grow abnormally large and far stronger than their usual level. He emphasized again that our boy had virtually no chance of survival, and advised the staff to mentally prepare themselves for the potential outcome. Back in the dungeon, Han Siha and Adele seemed fine for the moment, and had managed to defeat several slime monsters. However, it appeared the monsters kept coming, showing no signs of running out. Adele was frustrated, exclaiming that the monsters were becoming even more terrifying, and that the place had turned into hell in an instant. She became increasingly agitated, shouting that there seemed to be no end to it, as the monsters kept respawning over and over. She even swore that she would never look at a slime again, calling it slime salad. While she panicked, our boy found her words somewhat amusing as he watched her. But he also felt a bit worried. He noticed that Adele seemed exhausted from the relentless waves of monsters, yet she still looked surprisingly fine. He commented that although her timing skills were amateurish, her swordsmanship was on par with the professionals. He began to wonder if she could be the Earth Mage, destined to become a great sorcerer, or perhaps more accurately, a great mage swordsman. Still, he couldn't help but think it was odd for someone as fearsome as her to be rolling around in a beginner's practice area like that. When talking about Earth Mages, the term mage swordsman is fairly common. Even though the girl was a bit short-tempered, Han Siha thought it was remarkable that she wasn't openly looking down on him. He admired her personality, finding it quite impressive as he pondered over her character. Meanwhile, Adele noticed that he seemed distracted, not paying attention to the monsters and relaxing while she did all the hard work. She thought Han Siha was a bit of a creep and asked him why he was nodding to himself instead of helping to fight. While our boy Wonder said to her that they had been there for over 3 hours, he questioned why there was no response from outside to help them. It seemed as though no one knew there was a problem, which would explain why there was no response. He said this while looking up. Adele replied that it couldn't be helped since only about 30 minutes had passed outside, because time inside moved slower than it did outside. This, she said, was an advantage for them, as they could train sufficiently. Hearing this, our boy understood why there was no response yet. He added that even if they knew the situation and came to rescue them, they would still have several hours to hold out. They would need to endure and keep fighting the slime monster until the rescuers arrived, which seemed impossible. As she listened to what Han Siha said, her temper boiled again. She demanded to know why he had to say such unlucky words, as if they were just sitting there, waiting to die. Our boy sarcastically responded, as if he would ever do that, and seemed pleased as he said it. As they argued, he smiled and said to her to buy him some time, while she was confused and asked what he was planning. Our boy, who seemed to want to do something, told her she would know when the time came. He then asked her to keep the slime monster from getting too close, because it wouldn't take long to do what he needed to do. Hearing this, she demanded to know why she had to handle it alone, and asked what he was going to do in the meantime. But our boy ignored her and started executing his plan. As Adele watched him walk away with an angry and irritated expression, our boy felt a sense of self-satisfaction, thinking that his initial judgment about her was correct. Meanwhile, their cute companion Basil seemed worried about Adele, but our boy reassured him that he had everything planned out. As he walked, he noticed glowing vines emitting light. He mentioned that he had read about these vines in the story and knew how to deal with them. According to the original novel, the Error Dungeon was intended to highlight the differences in ability between the protagonist, Li Han, and Han Siha. Han Siha had previously tried and spectacularly failed at this part of the dungeon, which involved dealing with these vines. Our boy was pleased to find them and instructed Basil to search the area for more of these unique vines, gather them, and bring them to him. Basil carefully checked the area and, after completing his search, flew off to find more. While Basil was busy, our boy continued to recount the negative treatment of readers towards Han Siha, who had used the method and been cursed as a stupid loser and an evil guy. He commented that he didn't think Han Siha deserved such abuse, all while holding a unique vine in his hand. Meanwhile, Adele seemed to be managing fine alone against the slime, but her mana was running low. She demanded to know why it was taking Han Siha so long and cursed him in frustration. But speaking of the devil, our boy showed up, shouting that it was done. Adele, turning around, was surprised and a little confused, seeing both the boy and the mysterious vines as if he had built a barricade. She signaled him to hurry inside, although Adele was a bit confused and suggested doing things quietly because the slimes were regenerating so quickly. Our boy insisted that she get inside immediately. He then explained his plan, to build a defensive wall and kill the monsters outside of it. By using amplification magic and fire, he could stop the slimes from regenerating and cause them to evaporate. With confidence on his face, he cast a spell, creating a large green arrow with arrow magic. He added that the only thing left was to set the arrows on fire. Turning to Basil, he instructed, "It's your turn now." Basil's eyes glowed again as he began setting the arrows on fire. Our boy then released the flaming arrows outside their barricade, where the slime monsters, seeing the shining projectiles, were surprised. The beautiful and shining arrows, akin to fireworks, unexpectedly ended their lives with a large explosion. Meanwhile, Adele, witnessing Han Siha's creation, was amazed and couldn't believe it. She asked herself if this was really the Han Siha she knew, while as the slime seemed to evaporate and didn't regenerate. Our boy explained to her that when he buried the slimes and scattered their remains across the ground, the slime's poison had the property of exploding when exposed to fire magic. While saying this, she asked if he had also planned to prevent the rain of fire from reaching inside their barricade. Our boy responded that it was a good observation, but explained that their barricade vines were not ordinary. They were fire-resistant and immune to flames. Now that everything around them was burning, they just needed to wait for their rescue to arrive. As the situation seemed to be under control, our boy felt relieved. Adele looked at him and thought about how unlikely it was that she would be saved by him. She mused that nobles at Ardell Academy usually couldn't care less about commoners' lives, so she wondered if our boy had some ulterior motive. Noticing her deep thoughts, our boy asked what she was thinking about and why she was looking at him that way. He assumed she would thank him for saving her life. Despite her grumpy demeanor, Adele was kind-hearted and told him that she was indeed grateful, if only a little, because she owed him her life. Hearing this, our boy remarked that it was good and then asked if she could do him a favor. Adele, appearing worried and hesitant, wondered what the favor might be. He noted that if it was something she could easily do, she would not hesitate, but if it was a creepy request, she might decline. Before she could finish her words, our boy said to her that she needed to keep secret what had happened there, what he had seen and everything she had witnessed. He requested that she keep all of it confidential, including taming the beast, capturing the error slime in one go, and building the barricade with the vines. Adele realized that her guess was correct, but she still felt that something was off. She wondered if Han Siha was hiding something, thinking of him as a bastard with a secret, while observing him pick up some slime orbs. After that, the dungeon cleanup was handled vaguely. The two professors, who were earlier confused about the sudden dungeon errors, decided to reward the students who had closed the dungeon without major injuries. Following this event, our boy was called to the dean's office to receive a generous reward. As he sat comfortably in the dean's office, he appeared relieved. He mentioned that he understood the value of rewards and how they might be used, but he seemed uninterested. His priority was to make his cute beast and himself stronger. With the dean absent, he and Basil were alone. He called Basil over, who happily went to him with a bright smile on his face. As Basil approached, our boy checked his status. It showed that Basilisk Atrasis was a red dragon who was always cheerful and very serious about cheese and quite friendly towards him. It seemed that Basil's flamethrower ability had increased significantly, and his toxicity resistance was a new skill he had acquired during their encounter with the dungeon error. Our boy remarked that he was unsure about what the Dark Magician organization was up to, but he knew that Basil had come from the basement, implying that the Dark Magician organization had some connection to that place. Nonetheless, he stated that his cute Basil was not only a valuable dragon, but also a hatchling with outstanding talent and potential. He also praised Basil for his amazing growth rate, precise control of breath, and immense magic power, which left him even more amazed by how truly overwhelming Basil was in every aspect. He made sure to raise him properly, even sweating over the effort. Now, he told Basil that he had really gone through a lot to obtain the slime orbs. Showing one to Basil, he explained that it was an overpowered item and asked if it looked delicious to him, suggesting with a smile that he should try eating it. Basil, however, seemed disgusted and hesitant, as if he believed it was poisonous. Despite Basil's reluctance, he convinced him to try it, assuring him that it was delicious and that eating one or two wouldn't be fatal. After some hesitation, Basil eventually tried it, but to his surprise, he found the taste so unpleasant that he vomited. Our boy, observing this, thought that the taste must have been absolutely terrible, as he hadn't tried it himself and didn't know what it tasted like. Still, he smiled and noted that despite the terrible taste, the stats of his beast seemed to have changed. It appeared that the magic power and toxicity resistance had increased after eating the orb. The slime orb item amplifies the stats of the consumer, with just one increasing even basic mana stats, which usually takes a long time to improve. He mentioned that Basil had probably noticed a subtle change, but to his surprise, Basil became addicted to the orbs and consumed them all as if there were no tomorrow. As Basil ate them, his stats rapidly increased. Our boy was pleased, sitting and hearing the notification sounds, which felt like a reward. At that moment, someone knocked on his door. He wondered who it might be, only to find that it was Adele, who burst in and called him with an intense tone. However, she was only joking and soon became her usual kind self. She said she had been searching for him everywhere and had finally found him in the dean's office. Our boy wondered if Adele had been called there to receive items as well. Adele then demanded to know if he truly didn't care about giving her all the credit for dealing with the error slime monster. She implied that this would make her more well-known and result in her receiving more items than him. She asked if he was okay with that, while he responded while scratching his head, saying that he really didn't care about it, so she could lower her voice because his ears were hurting from her loudness. He mentioned that life was more important than such items and added that if rumors spread about him clearing the dungeon, it could cause trouble. Fame could attract the dark organization, which might lead to his demise if they found out he was living well and freely. He also said he didn't want to be famous like the protagonist. Adele, showing sympathy, said if that was the case, he should keep it to himself because she didn't want fame either. This created a dramatic atmosphere, and our boy wondered why she was so sympathetic. He told her abruptly that he didn't need sympathy from someone he didn't know and asked her not to mention it. Adele, stunned for a moment, approached him angrily and demanded to know how he didn't know her, questioning why he didn't. Our boy, seemingly irritated, covered his ears because her talking was like a machine gun. He sarcastically asked if he needed to know her and inquired about her name. He wanted to confirm if she was the person he had read about in the novel. When Adele said her name was Adele Stivia, our boy's jaw dropped in shock. He responded that he now knew her name and confirmed that she was indeed the great magician from a commoner's background who had consistently been in the top 3 at the academy. The main character who cruelly buried him alive in the story was now introducing herself to him and asking if he knew who she was. Our boy thought to himself that the person in front of him was the one who would end his life in the future. Panicking, he felt he was unlucky to encounter her, as if some higher power had given him a grim fate. Overthinking, he worried that his head might explode from the stress, muttering to himself that he was going crazy from this misfortune. Adele, seeing him in a state of paranoia, asked if he looked at himself in the mirror every day. She then pulled him over to a mirror to see himself. She remarked that she couldn't imagine that someone like him would come to the dean's office to receive an item. Seeing his reflection for the first time since being reincarnated in Han Siha's body, our boy was shocked by his filthy and shabby appearance. He commented on how it was possible that he did not appear as the handsome man he had imagined, realizing that people avoided him not out of fear, but out of disgust. Despite this, he remained confident and resolved to make some changes, starting with fixing his hair, before improving his overall appearance. The next day in their classroom, our boy made a grand and unexpected entrance. As he walked in, his classmates discussed him, wondering if he was new. They speculated that the handsome man must be a new transfer student, though he seemed familiar to them. Some of his other classmates recognized him, noting that he was indeed Han Siha, not a new student, due to his suddenly changed appearance. Others remarked that Han Siha seemed like a completely different person. As our boy sat there, all his classmates chattered about him. He joked that he must be handsome enough for everyone to be talking about him. Suddenly, one of his classmates asked if he had received some kind of polymorph treatment, expressing a desire to become as good-looking as him and asking to share the secret. Our boy thought about this young man with red hair named Creek, who came from a commoner's background and was trying to boss him around. Since he was not the real Han Siha, he was not so easily bullied. As Creek continued to mock him, calling him a pathetic loser, while our boy ignored him, the situation escalated. The guy insinuated that cutting his hair had made him lose his mind. Our boy, who harbored a strong dislike for people with talkative mouths, decided he couldn't tolerate this behavior any longer. Calmly, he warned the guy that if he didn't stop talking, he would have no choice but to silence him. The guy, undeterred, retorted that he was big enough to speak up, having been abandoned by his own family. Our boy shot back, advising him not to talk big. Meanwhile, our cute Basil emerged from his bag, exuding a domineering aura and an icy chill. The intense vibes between them left the guy trembling and nervous. Classmates were shocked, commenting that an ordinary student couldn't possess such a beastly presence. Despite the pressure, the guy remained tough and determined not to back down.